The Mi Notebook doesn't just come in a Core M version. This is the more powerful version that has a Core i5 62000U, 8GB of RAM, and a 250GB SSD. But the main feature is it has a dedicated NVIDIA 940MX GPU, so much more powerful than the integrated Intel solution. So let's have a look at it in greater detail. So at 1.25 kilos, this thing is very light. It's nice and thin, so it's very easy just to pick it up, put it in a bag, and off you go. So just like the 12.5-inch version, we have a USB 3.1 Type-C port that supports display out, charging, and data all at the same time, and USB 3 port. On the left-hand side, you'll find a full-size HDMI out, USB 3 port, and 3.5mm headphone jack, which supports microphones. Now the lid has absolutely no logo on there, which is unusual to see. Xiaomi have gone with a minimalistic approach here, and I quite like it. And pressing down on the lid, there is very little flex in that. Now on the rear we have a large intake vent for the 2 cooling fans inside, 5 rubber feet, and 2 downwards firing AKG speakers, just like the 12.5-inch version. Now the keyboard is essentially the same keyboard as the 12.5-inch unit, just a little wider. That's the only difference really. It is backlit. It has a really nice feel to it, typing on it. Good feedback, good key travel of 1.3mm, and it is backlit. Now there's only 2 levels, which is on or off. Unfortunately, we cannot dim it right down for late time use. And the touchpad is a Synaptics touchpad. It supports gestures. It has a very smooth glass-like feel to it, and I really do like it. And the keyboard as well. Both of them I'd rate as being one of the better keyboards and touchpad combinations on a Chinese device. So we have another 1080p panel, which is a bit of a shame that we didn't see something a little bit higher resolution there. But Xiaomi's choice was maybe cost cutting or maybe for battery life, who knows, but they covered it with glass. No touchscreen on there, which is disappointing. I at least hoped that the premium model would have had a touchscreen. If you're going to put glass on there, my logic is, why not also make it a touchscreen? So it's very reflective, as you can see here, in daylight. And with 300 nits of brightness, it's not the brightest screen you will use, but it's still usable. Now the keyboard does look quite good for late time use. After 13 seconds, it will automatically turn itself off. Unfortunately, we cannot adjust the brightness or lower that down. Here is the screen at the lowest possible brightness setting. I do find it to be a little bit brighter than I would like personally, but it's not bright enough that it would actually start to hurt my eyes. So my unit came with Windows 10 Home Chinese, and I had a lot of trouble to try and get that in English. In the end, I gave up and just did a clean install and restored the drivers. Now, if you're after the drivers, there's a link in the description. You can also download them from techtablets.com. So it has a 256GB Samsung SSD in there, and it has good performance. Reads at least are very good. So I'll show you right here. The write speed I found to be quite disappointing, only 309 sequential write, although the 4K write speeds are good. Other benchmarks I ran, this is Cinebench score. So OpenGL 53 frames per second, and the CPU gets 280 CB. And the pass mark 8 score was 2227. Geekbench 4. The Geekbench 4 GPU score, Future Mark, PC Mark 8 Home Accelerated, almost 3000 there. And the wireless speeds, no complaints, very good. I found the wireless range also to be really good. No problems with it whatsoever, having the Intel wireless AC in there that has dual antennas and dual band, of course. Now 3D Mark scores, this is Skydiver and CloudGate. Those are the benchmarks I have run on it so far. So battery life is one of the most important things on a very portable machine like this with a little bit of power. Now my results have varied here. It depends on what you're doing, of course, but basic light web use, using Edge, I got around 7 hours. Now as soon as I started to multitask a little bit, so a little bit of YouTube, listening to some music at the same time, a very small video editing test, a couple of benchmarks, then that plummeted down to about 5 hours, which I don't find to be very good. Now if you're going to game on the battery, or do something very demanding like video editing just the whole time, then you can only expect around 3 hours. It doesn't take long to burn through that battery. But on the upside, it does charge extremely quick. Only 30 minutes, and you have 50% battery life. So it has dual AKG downward firing speakers, just like the smaller 12.5-inch model. I've swapped over now to an external mic that has stereo inputs. Let's have a listen to how loud it sounds. I think these speakers sound very decent, adequate output there. There's a little bit of bass to them. Now the 3.5mm headphone jack I found is very loud, but there's a tiny little bit of interference that I can hear when I connect up my earphones. Now here's a sample of the front facing camera. It's a 1.3 megapixel one, can shoot up to 720p max, 30 frames per second in good lighting conditions. Now I'm going to go indoors and we'll see just how it performs. And now indoors in low light, you can see that the camera frame rate is quite choppy. You see my hand is blurring here, and this isn't good at all. Now, can it be used to edit video? I think for 1080p, it's perfectly fine. It's quick, it's not too bad. Encoding times are a little bit slower than most machines, and definitely slower than, for example, my i7 desktop. But that's to be expected. Now, when it comes to editing 4K, again, it's possible. But I did notice that once I started to get around 10 different clips in there, some transitions, other effects being applied, that it did get a little slow. And encoding times with 4K, you need to go off and have a coffee and then come back and hopefully it's done there. But if you do use software that supports Intel QuickSync, at least the encoding times can be a lot quicker. So we know that the NVIDIA 940MX isn't exactly a GPU monster. It's not a 1080, but can we game on it? Well, here I'm running Grand Theft Auto in 1080p with the lowest settings. And you see I'm getting playable frame rates, so you can do some gaming on the side. Now, more demanding titles like Witcher 3, you need to run in 720p and always on the lowest setting. Now, if you'd like to see more gaming, check out my gaming review clip there where I cover some other games like Battlefield 4. Now, just above the keyboard is where you'll find the exhaust vents for the two fans inside. Fan noise varies. When you're just doing light work, you don't even hear the fan at all, but let's have a listen to the fan under 100% load gaming. Now, something that is very important in notebooks is the thermal. So is it going to get too hot once you do something really demanding? What I've been doing is running Heaven Benchmark that has been taxing both the GPU and the CPU. Now, this has been going for about an hour and it's getting very hot. You can see temperatures on the CPU have reached 83 degrees. That's getting quite hot. And the GPU has reached 80. Now, has it had any thermal throttling? The good news is the CPU has absolutely no thermal throttling, no power limit throttling either. So you can get 100% performance out of the CPU no matter what. So you keep pushing it hard, it'll keep going, which is good. However, the GPU's another story. Now what happens is the clock rates will go from 993 megahertz right down to about 771 once it hits 80 degrees. Which doesn't take long, only about 10 minutes of gaming, and you'll notice there's a slight drop in performance there. So thermal throttling does occur on the GPU. So let's have a look now at the physical temperatures. I notice that it gets the hottest on the top, not actually on the bottom. On the bottom we have the intake vents. So there we have 50 degrees. That is very hot to the touch. I mean, this thing is smoking hot. Touching that is, wow, that is really hot. Now around the palm rest and touchpad, that isn't too bad. So 30 degrees around there. I'm happy with that, but I'm not happy with the temperatures we have around the top of the keyboard. That's just too hot. So if you are going to game on this machine, I would definitely recommend at least propping it up. That's the minimum, and using a laptop cooler. Now that's something we shouldn't have to do. If the rear feet on it were just a little bit higher, I think that would help thermals. Just to go over my pros and cons here, the build quality is definitely a pro. It is very premium, it feels very nice, and the weight of it, it's thin and it's light. At only 1.25 kilos, it's great. It's a very portable machine, and it packs a bit of power in there too. And I was surprised to see that I could actually get away with playing GTA 5 on low settings in 1080p. Did not expect that. Other games are going to have to lower down to 720p, lower settings, but you can get away with a little bit of light gaming. Now, it's not a gaming notebook. That is clear because it has a 940MX GPU in there. And I did find that it just gets too hot, up to 80 degrees, and the surface temperatures of 50 degrees I find to be unacceptable. The other con is the price. At the time of the review, this is about $900 US, which is definitely a lot steeper than the $750 US release price in China. Retailers are adding their cut to it, and at the moment it's a very new device and very limited supply, so the price is quite high there. So wait until that drops down. And of course, there are plenty of other options in there. The market is flooded with other models. Now, battery life. Battery life is okay. Depending on what you're doing, you can get perhaps 7 hours with just light web use. But if you plan to multitask, use a bit of YouTube, do some short video encoding, then you're only going to get around 5 hours, which is disappointing again. Now, I did notice that the web camera works well in good lighting conditions, but in low light conditions, it really struggles. The frame rate drops down to about 15 frames per second. The audio jack also has a tiny little bit of static interference coming from somewhere that is affecting the quality of line out on the machine. So can I recommend getting this? Well, if the price drops down, yes, it's a nice portable machine. And personally, I think if you don't need the power, why not go for the Core M3 version, which has better battery life, and it's a good $300 or $250 US cheaper as well. Thank you so much for watching this review, and hopefully I will see you back in the channel. Now, if you like this review and you haven't subscribed already, why not think about doing so? Thanks a lot, and I will see you soon.